From the lowest to the highest, from the furthest to the nearest, from the smallest of the smallest to the greatest of the greatest, yoga is about all of life, everything we do, all of existence. My name's James Bogue. Welcome to the Whole Life Yoga Podcast. Today, the topic is resolutions, and it's the last day of 2024, so I thought I would take a moment to share an idea or two about New Year's resolutions. And obviously, this is a time of the year when many people make commitments to themselves. And I saw some sketch that there's two dogs sitting next to each other having a conversation, and one of them with the speech bubble asks the other, "What's a New Year's resolution?" And the other one said, "I think it's a to-do list for the first day of the year." Something like that. The idea that often these things, we have all these great intentions, but we don't necessarily see them through. And in the yogic tradition, this idea of seeing things through is very foundational. And in the Yoga Sutra, the very first quality that is specifically mentioned as being essential for yoga practice is this beautiful Sanskrit word, śraddhā. And śraddhā often gets translated as faith, but as I've mentioned on previous occasions, and will undoubtedly do so again, faith isn't really a full representation of the significance of the word śraddhā. Śraddhā does mean faith, but it's a specific type of faith, the faith that comes from putting things to the test in the laboratory of one's own direct experience. It's also etymologically related to the word hrit, which is the word for heart. So śraddhā is the faith that comes from wholehearted, faithful exploration that is congruent with one's conscience. So, if we are going to develop this śraddhā, this self-trust, this faith that is born out of direct experience, and if it's such an important prerequisite for practice, we might ask the question, how can I cultivate this self-trust, this faith in myself, this faith in life? We will undoubtedly, sometimes in life, have experiences that would try our faith. And sometimes people say, faith will always be tested. So, if we want to strengthen our faith, you might think, if it's going to be tested, if it's going to be challenged, how can I practically go about fortifying it so I can move through the challenging periods and maintain that self-trust so I can keep moving forwards on my own authentic path of practice? One time, many years ago, I was giving a course on the Yoga Sutra, and we got to the 20th sutra in chapter 1, in which this quality, this principle is mentioned. And one of the students in the group said, "Oh, I think some people are just born with that. And I'm not such a confident person. I don't have so much trust in myself." And while I sympathize with the person's perspective, I wasn't convinced by it. Because I think often those who we perceive as having a lot of self-trust, who knows what they've been through to earn that or fortify that or develop that. But in that class, I suggested something I've suggested many times since as well, is that if that's what it feels like, that this deep self-trust, this deep self-confidence is something a bit foreign for us, then we can start where we are and start to develop it step by patient step. And we start, one way I would suggest, is by making promises to ourselves that we can keep. In other words, be impeccable with your word, as is suggested in that beautiful book. I think it's called Don Miguel Ruiz, The Four Agreements. And the first agreement is be impeccable with your word. But be impeccable with your word isn't just a rule. It is a practice. Just like the cultivation of śraddhā is a practice. And the idea of being impeccable with our word, speaking the truth, cultivating truthfulness, we find this in traditions from all over the world. And in the Indic tradition, there is a beautiful proverb or wise saying, subhāṣita in the Sanskṛt, which says, Manasyekam, vacasyekam, karmaṇyekam, mahātmanā. Manasyanyat, vacasyanyat, karmaṇyanyat, durātmanā. So you might notice the first and second line are very similar. What are they saying? The first line, Manasyekam, vacasyekam, karmaṇyekam, mahātmanā. So manas, the realm of one's thoughts. Vachas, the realm of one's speech and expression. Karma, the realm of one's actions and undertakings. When a person has congruence between the thought, the word, and the action, between the mental state, that which is being spoken or shared and expressed vocally, and that which is being embodied and enacted, when there is that congruence, that is a mahātmanā, that is a great soul. We feel expansive when we cultivate, when we experience this cohesion. On the other hand, if Manasyanyat, vacasyanyat, karmaṇyanyat, durātmanā, if our mind is in one place, our words are saying something else, and our actions are something else again, that is a soul in torment. How true this is. So when I hear this proverb, I see this is so true. When I experience cohesion, my thought, my word, my action all lined up, it does feel expansive. When I act in that type of congruence, it bolsters my self-trust. If, however, I'm acting in a way that is not congruent, then I'm just attenuating my self-trust. I'm weakening myself. I'm sinking myself. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, don't let yourself be your own worst enemy. Let yourself be your own true friend. Lift yourself up by your own actions. Don't sink yourself by your own actions. Now, I don't know about you, but it's the end of the year, and one exercise that some of my friends have recommended to me is one takes inventory of what have I managed to do in the last 12 months? What have I achieved? What are some things I've managed to accomplish? And where are some areas where I might have fallen down? What can I learn from this year? What can I put into practice to help me maybe do even better in the year to come? And what I notice is that sometimes I have not acted with the depth of congruence that I would really like. I have sunk myself. I've been less than my own best friend. And in some occasions, I have been a good, true friend to myself. So I can learn from this and hopefully, going forwards, act in deeper congruence. But this idea of unifying thought, word, and action, one thing I find interesting about this is obviously yoga offers us a somewhat vast structure or frame within which we can practice and cultivate this togetherness, this congruence, this being a joined-up individual in the sense of a person who is no longer subject to division and fragmentation. The idea of yoga, which means to join, to connect, is to become a joined-up, whole, complete person, integrating all those different parts of ourselves. And this is why being impeccable with our word is a practice rather than a rule. Because when we make the sincere, steady, dedicated effort to be impeccable with our word, something that can happen is we may make a promise to ourselves with excellent intentions, as far as that was possible, only to later realize that actually that's not the appropriate thing for me to do. And so we want to be cultivating congruence between our thought, our speech, and our actions. But sometimes we might make promises that we feel, if I keep this promise, I'll actually be doing harm to myself or to others. So as we go along, we have to have the capacity and the flexibility and the forgiveness to sometimes recognize, actually, I need to make a correction because I said something that wasn't entirely appropriate. It wasn't really proper to me, even if in the moment I thought it was. And this brings me to the idea I'd like to share. Sometimes people talk about the breath being this amazing gateway or threshold between the realm, the surface layer of our awareness and the deeper layers of our awareness. People suggest when our awareness is somewhat distracted, fragmented, dispersed, the breath will be somewhat incongruent. It won't be so smooth, it won't be so balanced. And when we come into a state of deeper integration, when we come into greater yoga, then the breath will be calmer and more even. So the breath is this bridge or this threshold between the conscious and the subconscious, between the gross, obvious, superficial surface level of our experience and those deeper, subtler layers. So we have the breath as this bridge. In this subhāṣita, this wise saying that we've just talked about, manas, vachas and karma, thoughts, words and deeds. It's interesting that speech sits there in the middle. And if we want to cultivate self-trust, the suggestion that I'm making to myself at the beginning of this new year is to recommit to this idea of being impeccable with one's word. And one can practice this in a very basic way by doing what I say I'm going to do with very simple things. Like, for example, when I'm about to brush my teeth, I can say, now I'm going to brush my teeth. And I keep that promise to myself. And I start with very mundane things that I'm almost 100% sure I can follow through on. Now, you may see, if you're watching this on YouTube, there is a mountain behind me. Now, it is forbidden to climb this mountain. I could see such a mountain and feel a tremendous allure to go and climb it. And I could say, I'm going to go and climb that mountain tomorrow, only to then find out that if I do climb the mountain, I risk being imprisoned for trespass or receiving a huge fine that I won't be able to pay. If I then tomorrow find out that information, what am I going to do? Am I going to break my word? I'm not going to climb the mountain now because I realize I might go to jail. That's probably the sensible course forwards. What happens to my self-trust then? Like, oh no, I lied to myself, I'm not keeping my word. Potentially, it doesn't necessarily lead to a diminishment of self-trust, because I can say, now I have learned this new information, and so I have to change my course of action. But nonetheless, day by day, I can keep doing my best to honor what I say by paying close attention to my speech. Sometimes when we're talking, we say things that surprise ourselves. And this is a way of things that have previously been hidden in the depths of our subconscious, we might say, coming into the light where we can gain greater awareness of the real state of our internal reality. So speech is a very powerful realm. In the Indic tradition, sound is regarded and recognized as the source of everything. We exist in a realm of vibration. We exist in a realm of frequency. Words have power. In the world we live in, we are subject to all sorts of propaganda that exploits the power of language. And it's very easy to find ourselves parroting or repeating ideas, stories, beliefs that are not really proper. They're not really appropriate to us. These are ideas that one way or another we have somehow allowed ourselves to become adhered or attached to. And I'm suggesting to myself, and I offer this to you as well, is that paying special attention to what we say can be a tremendously powerful way to accelerate our practice and to help us actually feel fuller, more satisfied, more complete in our day-to-day lives. feeling more content. Because if I foster this cohesion between my thoughts, my words, and my actions, I'm going to reduce the dis-ease I feel within the field of my own experience. So I could focus on my actions, I could focus on my thoughts, but speech is this bridge. It's subtler than action, it's more immediate, but it's grosser than thought, it's more tangible. And there's a space between the thought that emerges and then its manifestation in the form of vocalized speech. So being impeccable with our word, I would suggest, is an amazingly potent way to deepen our self-awareness, to get to know ourselves a little bit more, steadily, easily, to notice things that previously have maybe been concealed to ourselves, and to foster the type of congruence that will be its own reward. The only caveat is with this practice to let it be one that is sustained. It's not a to-do list for the first day of the year, but every day of the year. And also to undertake the practice with a spirit of play. Because, at least in my own experience, when we are undertaking this practice, sometimes it may feel that we fall off, that we say things that we cannot follow through on. Or we say something and realize, oh no, I was a bit stupid, I was shooting my mouth off there. I said that before I thought it through. But noticing that is itself an empowerment. Once we notice, we're empowered and we can do something about it. So if I notice, for example, that in certain types of gathering, I tend to want to say too much, or in other types of gathering, I just don't say anything at all, I self-censor, this noticing is itself an empowerment. And I can then invite myself into a more authentic expression. So paying attention to speech, I would suggest, is a very potent and always accessible yoga practice that through all the different stages and cycles of the year to come, we can work with to foster more cohesion. And I'm of the persuasion that cohesion and congruence is really the foundation for deepening beauty and greater potency in our creative acts. So when we speak and act from a congruent place, it tends to be more easy for that speech and action to be its own fulfillment, its own reward. Whereas if I speak and act from a unthought through place, that is not so attentive, that is not so careless, that's when I might tend to make pronouncements or step forwards into actions that, rather than being their own reward, lead me to potentially unnecessary suffering. So this is my resolution, such as it is, to do my best to be more impeccable with my word, and in so doing, to cultivate deeper śraddhā, that trust in myself that will help me then develop greater trust in the miracle of life that I am part of. So at the beginning of this new calendar year, I wish that you can find ways to practice that help you find more congruence in your life and feel more coherence with the intelligence that holds all of this amazing creation together.